My name is Melvina Licata, and I was 22 years old when my family decided I no longer belonged in the house I grew up in. I always knew something about my family was broken. You don't grow up feeling like a guest in your own home without realizing it eventually. But knowing you're unwanted and being thrown out like you're disposable are two very different kinds of pain. My older sister Grace had been working toward that moment for as long as I could remember. Even when we were kids, she had a gift. No, a method. She knew exactly how to twist the truth so it landed on me. If something went missing, it was Melvina. If something broke, I must have done it. If she forgot her chores or her homework, somehow I was to blame. And my parents, they never asked questions, they never hesitated. They just believed her. One memory still burns brighter than the rest. I was 13. Mom had left her purse on the kitchen counter. Later that day, she noticed cash was gone. Before I could even speak, Grace gasped dramatically. "Oh my God," she said, clutching her chest. "Melvina took it." She said it like she had just solved a crime. I hadn't even been near the purse. But it didn't matter. Mom's face hardened instantly. She started screaming, calling me a liar, a thief, asking how she could have raised someone like me. Behind her, Grace smiled. She always did. And every time she got away with it, she pushed further. By the time we were adults still living under our parents' roof, Grace didn't even bother hiding her resentment anymore. She complained openly about me, about how I was lazy, how I dragged the family down, how I did nothing while she worked so hard. She'd been trying to convince them to kick me out for years. At first, my parents only pretended to agree. They sided with her verbally, but never actually forced me to leave. Not until the night before my birthday. I was already in bed when I heard my bedroom door creak open. I stayed completely still, breathing slow, pretending to be asleep. My mom whispered, "She's asleep." The door closed gently. At first, I thought they were just checking on me. Then I heard them walk back down the hallway, their voices low. That's when Grace spoke. "I want her gone." My heart slammed against my ribs. "She bothers me," Grace continued. "I'm tired of living like this. I don't want to share a wall with her anymore. I want her room. I want her out." There was a pause, just long enough for hope to flicker. Then my dad spoke without hesitation. "Then tell her to leave. We'll support you." That was it. No discussion, no concern, no question about where I'd go. My mom laughed softly. "Her room is finally going to be bigger. We can knock down the wall and connect it. You deserve it." I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my entire body numb. They weren't just okay with it. They were excited. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I wasn't even angry yet. I just felt erased. Part of me had always hoped, stupidly, that deep down they cared. That one day I'd do something right in their eyes. That night destroyed that illusion. The next morning, we sat at the breakfast table like nothing was wrong. Grace scrolled through her phone, eating her toast slowly, dragging it out like she was savoring every second. Finally, she looked up at me with that smug little grin. "You should start packing," she said. "We've decided it's time for you to go." I looked at my parents. Dad kept drinking his coffee like it was just another morning. Mom didn't even look up at first. When she finally did, her voice was calm, almost relieved. "It's for the best," she said. "Grace deserves more space. She's a wonderful daughter. She's earned it." Earned it, as if I were something she'd suffered through. Grace smiled wider. "So you'll be gone by tonight, right?" For a few seconds, I just stared at her, trying to understand what I'd done wrong besides being born. Then I swallowed. "Yeah," I said quietly. Grace beamed, like she'd just won an award. That night, I packed what little I owned, some clothes, my phone charger, the small amount of money I'd saved, just enough for a cab. From my room, I could hear them laughing in the living room. When I stepped outside, my dad didn't say a word. He just slammed the door behind me. No goodbye. I stood there for a moment, staring at the house I thought was my home. Then I turned around and walked away. The cab ride felt longer than it actually was. I sat in the back seat, my bag on my lap, fingers clenched so tightly around the strap that my knuckles went numb. Streetlights slid past the window in long, blurred streaks. Houses, stores, other people's lives continuing like nothing had just shattered. I didn't cry. Not yet. I kept telling myself to hold it together. Crying felt like something I wasn't allowed to do until I knew where I was going to land. I knew exactly where to tell the driver. "My grandparents' house," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They lived about 30 minutes away. Close enough that my parents visited when it suited them. Far enough that I'd always felt like a guest there too, until that night. When the cab pulled up, it was late. The house was dark except for one soft light near the kitchen. I stood on the porch for a long moment, staring at the door. A new fear crept in. What if they don't want me either? What if I really don't belong anywhere? My hand hovered in the air before I finally knocked. The door opened almost immediately. My grandmother stood there in her robe, her hair slightly messy, eyes already filled with concern the moment she saw me. "Melvina," she said softly, "what are you doing here so late?" I tried to answer. Nothing came out. My throat closed, and before I could stop myself, my face crumpled. She didn't wait for an explanation. She stepped forward and pulled me inside, wrapping her arms around me like she'd been waiting for this moment all along. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Why are you here?" I swallowed hard. "Mom and Dad, they kicked me out." Her eyes widened. "They what?" And that was it. Everything I'd held in, the years of being blamed, ignored, overlooked, came spilling out. I told her about Grace, about the lies, about the conversation I overheard, about how they didn't even hesitate. I hadn't cried back at the house. I hadn't cried in the cab. But standing in my grandmother's warm kitchen, smelling coffee grounds and old wood and safety, the dam broke. She held me tightly while I sobbed, murmuring, oh, honey," over and over again. Then I heard footsteps behind us. "What's going on?" I turned around and saw my grandfather standing in the doorway. He was a quiet man, the kind who didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. His eyes moved from my tear-streaked face to my grandmother's expression. "What happened?" he asked again more firmly. I wiped my face, my voice barely audible. "Mom and Dad kicked me out." My grandmother told him everything I'd just told her. As she spoke, his face darkened. His jaw tightened. When she finished, he didn't say anything at first. He just sat down heavily at the table. Then, after a long silence, he looked at me and said, "And where exactly do they think they got that house?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" My grandmother sighed. "You never knew?" My heart skipped. "Knew what?" Your grandfather leaned back in his chair. "I bought that house for them when they got married." The words didn't register at first. "You bought it?" I asked slowly. He nodded. "Put it in their name for convenience. They were young. I wanted them to have a start." My hands started shaking. "So, it's not really—" "They don't own it the way they think they do," he said calmly. "And they don't get to throw my granddaughter out of a house I paid for like she's nothing." He stood up and walked to his desk, pulled out a small piece of paper, and handed it to me. "Call this man in the morning," he said. "His name is James. He's a lawyer. Tell him who you are. Tell him everything. Then wait." I didn't fully understand what he meant, but for the first time since the night before, something shifted inside me. Not hope exactly, something steadier. My grandmother made me tea. We sat together at the kitchen table while exhaustion finally crashed over me. She kept shaking her head, muttering under her breath, like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. When she led me to the guest room, she tucked me in like I was a child again. "Get some rest, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're safe now." Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something strange. For the first time in my life, I wasn't under my parents' roof. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing. I woke up the next morning to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a brief, disorienting second, I forgot everything. The house was quiet, peaceful. No slammed doors, no sharp voices, no Grace. Then it all came rushing back. I wasn't home anymore, and I wasn't going back. I reached for my phone and immediately saw the messages. "Mom, where are you?" "Mom, you better not be at my parents' house." "Mom, you're making this harder than it has to be." "Harder for who?" I didn't respond. At the breakfast table, my grandfather folded his newspaper and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Did you call James yet?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He slid his phone toward me. "Do it now." My hands trembled as I dialed the number. It rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered. "James speaking." "Hi," I said quietly. "My grandfather told me to call you. He said you could help." There was a pause. "You must be Melvina," he said. "All right, tell me everything." So I did. I told him about Grace, about the lies, about the night I overheard them deciding to throw me out, about how easily my parents had agreed. I even told him about how my dad slammed the door behind me. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then James said, "They made a very big mistake." He explained everything clearly, carefully. The house, the paperwork, the legal reality my parents had conveniently ignored. "They do not have the authority they think they do," he said, "and they definitely don't have the right to remove you." My chest felt tight. "So what happens now?" "Now," he replied, "we wait and let them panic." It didn't take long. That afternoon, the text changed. "Mom, please come home. We need to talk." "Mom, your father didn't mean it." "Mom, Grace is just stressed. You know how she is. I ignored every single one. By evening, the calls started. Then something even more desperate. A police officer knocked on my grandparents' door. My grandmother's hand flew to her chest. What's wrong? We received a report that your granddaughter may be missing, the officer said gently. Missing. I almost laughed. I stepped forward. I'm right here. The officer looked relieved. Your parents filed the report. I'm not missing, I said firmly. I was kicked out. The officer nodded slowly. That's what we suspected. He left shortly after, and my grandfather's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. They're scrambling, he said quietly. Good. That night, I heard shouting outside. I looked out the window and felt my stomach twist. My parents' car. And Grace's. They were on the porch, banging on the door, demanding I come out and apologize. My father's voice cut through the air. This has gone far enough. My grandfather opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. Leave, he said calmly. Grace scoffed. This isn't your business. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue. You have no right to be here, he said. And if you don't leave immediately, I will call the police. They froze. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across their faces. The next morning, James called again. My grandfather listened carefully, then nodded once. He hung up and looked straight at my father, who had shown up uninvited yet again. You have until the end of the week to vacate the house, he said evenly. If you don't, you are out of my will. My father laughed nervously. You wouldn't do that. My grandfather's expression didn't change. Watch me. They didn't leave, even after the ultimatum, even after the warning. Even after everything was laid out in plain, undeniable terms, my parents chose denial. They told themselves my grandfather was bluffing. They told themselves I would come crawling back. They told themselves Grace deserved everything. By the end of the week, James followed through. The paperwork was filed, the accounts were frozen, the will was updated, and just like that, my parents lost everything they thought was guaranteed. I wasn't there when they finally packed up and left the house. I heard about it later, from a neighbor, from a relative, from whispers that traveled faster than apologies ever had in my family. They moved into a small rented apartment across town. Grace didn't take it well. The last message she ever sent me came late one night. Grace, I hope you're happy. You ruined everything. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I blocked her. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. A few weeks later, my grandfather asked me to meet him at the house. I hadn't been back since the night I left. Standing in front of it again felt surreal. The same walls, the same door, but everything felt different. He handed me a set of keys. You belong here, he said simply. I swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just live well. That night, I walked through the empty room slowly. The room that had once been Grace's. The room that had been mine. The walls they planned to knock down. They never got the chance. My boyfriend Ethan helped me move in a few days later. He didn't ask for details. He didn't push. He just showed up. With boxes, with patience, with quiet support. You okay? He asked softly as we set the last box down. I nodded. Yeah, I really am. And for the first time, it was true. My parents never contacted me again. No apologies, no explanations. Just silence. But in that silence, I found something I'd been missing my entire life. Peace.